Today, we're beginning to look at Word of Faith theology buzzwords. And I want to start off with name it and claim it, because this is one of the main ideas behind Word of Faith theology. This phrase, name it and claim it, encapsulates the belief that by speaking one's desires in faith out loud, they can manifest what they say into their reality. Now, the phrase name it and claim it became widely associated with the Word of Faith movement in the 1970s and 1980s, although it wasn't coined by just one individual. In fact, there were several key figures who played a significant role in popularizing the teaching behind the idea of name it and claim it. Of course, any look at name it and claim it, Word of Faith theology, would not be complete without mentioning Kenneth Hagin, who was the father of the Word of Faith movement. In fact, Hagin's followers lovingly called him Dad Hagin. Hagin's teachings heavily emphasized the power of spoken words and positive confession and claiming God's promises by faith. And although he may not have coined the exact phrase, his message laid the groundwork for it. Hagin tells us 4 steps to getting anything that we want from God. In his book, How to Write Your Own Ticket with God, he says that we are to say it, we are to do it, we are to receive it, and we are to tell it. By doing these 4 things, Hagin says, you can write your own ticket with God. You can get God to give you anything you say, do, receive, and tell. Now, the second person we can look at when it comes to Word of Faith theology is none other than Kenneth Copeland, Hagin's protege and a major promoter still today of Word of Faith theology. Copeland frequently uses the name it and claim it concept and made it a central part of his message on prosperity and healing. Copeland teaches throughout various teachings that you have what you say. You say it long enough until it comes to pass. Other prominent Word of Faith figures who propagated this phrase were Frederick Casey Price, Charles Capps, Oral Roberts in the Seed Faith movement, which overlaps with name it and claim it, Word of Faith theology. In fact, you'll find there are a lot of these movements that are just a rebranding, if you will, of Word of Faith theology, which actually has its roots in New Thought metaphysics. You also have guys like Benny Hinn. You also have guys like Creflo Dollar. And that's just to name a few. Now, it's worth noting that the phrase name it and claim it was originally used by critics of the Word of Faith movement to summarize and to critique its teachings. Yet, over time, it became a kind of shorthand, both inside and outside the movement, for teachings that promote declaring or confessing what you desire by faith in order to receive it from God. The idea behind this teaching is rooted in scriptures like Mark 11:24, which Kenneth Hagin, in his book I Believe in Visions, said was the verse that changed his life. This is what we read. Therefore, I tell you, everything you pray and ask for, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Now, if we're looking at this verse standalone, we can't really argue with the Word of Faith teachers. However, verses in the Bible are not really meant to be read isolated. The chapter and verses were put in there for us to easily find what we're looking for. But the problem arises when we take these verses out of their context, and there are circles of literary context. So we might ask ourselves, who wrote the book? Look at that context, right? Look at the verse. Look at the surrounding verses. Look at the whole book. Look at everything this author has written in the Bible. Look at the whole Testament. Look at the whole Bible. There are circles of literary context. And if you deviate and you just look at specific verses isolated, well, you'll come up with mixed up theology like the Word of Faith teaches. So let me give you an example of this. The verse, Mark 11:24, is actually from a passage which is Mark 11:20-25. So let's read that, and then let's look at what this really means. Early in the morning, as they were passing by, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots up. Then Peter remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered." Jesus replied to them, "Have faith in God. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, 'Be lifted up and thrown into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, but believes what he says will happen, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, everything you pray and ask for, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, so that your Father in heaven will also forgive you your wrongdoing." So the first thing that we can look at here is this phrase, faith in God. Have faith in God. The phrase in Greek is piston theo, in which God, theo, can be understood in the objective genitive case. So this would make the phrase literally faith of God or faith from God, in the sense of faith given by God for miracles. Such faith requires the response of faith in God from us, where God is the object of our faith. The Word of Faith theology teaches that faith is a force, much like gravity or electricity. It's something that you can control. It is something that you can build up like a muscle. Other examples of the use of the objective genitive case include Luke chapter 6, verse 12, which tells us, "During those days he went out to the mountain to pray and spent all night in prayer to God." So God is the object of prayer. Luke 11:42 says, "But woe to you, Pharisees! You give a tenth of mint, rue, and every kind of herb, and you bypass justice and love for God. These things you should have done without neglecting the others." In this passage, God is the object of love. In Romans 3:18, we read, "There is no fear of God before their eyes," where God is the object of fear. All throughout the Bible, God is both the source and the object of true faith. Romans 4 verse 3 tells us, "For what does the scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him for righteousness." Abraham believed God, not just God's promise, and Abraham's faith, was credited to him as righteousness. We too must focus our faith and trust not on the issue involved, and not on faith itself, but fully on God. Looking at Matthew 11:24 again, we read, "Therefore I tell you, everything you pray and ask for, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Now, this phrase here, believe, and it will be yours. This is prominent in Word of Faith teachings. The kind of faith that produces these results, however, cannot be created by humans or worked up. We must receive it from God himself because he is both the source and the object or the focus of true faith. We cannot take credit for what happens as a result of this faith. Sometimes what we believe for may happen immediately. At other times, it may never happen at all. Yet God gives the faith that our prayers have been heard and that God will respond in his perfect time and in his perfect way. So Mark 11:24 tells us, therefore I tell you, everything you pray and ask for, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. This is the verse that changed Kenneth Hagin's life. But verse 25 tells us, and whenever you pray and whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, so that your Father in heaven will also forgive you your wrongdoing. And this is an important point that Word of Faith promoters seem to neglect. There are conditions in Scripture to our prayers being answered. One of them is when you stand praying, forgive. So we can't deceive ourselves into thinking that we can maintain the proper kind of faith that brings answers to prayer if we are secretly or even openly holding on to hatred and bitterness and resentment in our hearts against anyone. The Bible tells us that these kind of attitudes will hinder our prayers.